The morning air was crisp and refreshing, carrying with it the melodies of birds perched high in the forest canopy. Sarah inhaled deeply, savoring the peace that only the woods could provide. Her dog Max trotted happily beside her, his tail wagging as his nose darted from one interesting scent to the next. It was their ritual, these walks, a time to escape the bustle of life and reconnect with the raw beauty of nature. Today felt no different, at least at first. The forest seemed alive, vibrant with the hum of insects and the occasional rustle of leaves as a squirrel darted past. Max, ever the curious explorer, led the way with his unbridled enthusiasm. But then, just as they rounded a bend in the trail, everything changed. Max stopped suddenly, his body stiff, ears perked high. His low growl was the first indication that something was amiss. Sarah frowned, her eyes scanning the path ahead, but she saw nothing unusual. "What is it, boy?" she asked, her voice tinged with curiosity and concern. Max didn't respond, at least not in the way she expected. Instead, he bolted forward, barking furiously, his voice echoing through the trees. Sarah called after him, her heart quickening. When she caught up, she found him standing at the entrance of a cave. The opening was dark, foreboding, framed by vines and moss-covered rocks. Cold air drifted out, sending a shiver down her spine. Max's barking was relentless now, almost desperate. Sarah crouched beside him, placing a calming hand on his back. "What's gotten into you?" she murmured. But even as she tried to soothe him, she felt it, an unexplainable pull toward the cave. It was as if something inside was calling to her. The flashlight in her pack felt heavier than usual as she retrieved it. Sarah hesitated for a moment, glancing at Max. His wide eyes seemed to plead with her. "All right," she said softly. "Let's see what all the fuss is about." Stepping into the cave was like crossing into another world. The air was damp and thick, carrying the earthy scent of wet stone. Her flashlight beam cut through the darkness, illuminating jagged walls and a floor that glistened with moisture. Max followed close behind, his usual confidence replaced by cautious steps. The sound of dripping water echoed eerily, each drop amplifying the stillness around them. As they ventured deeper, Sarah's unease grew. The temperature seemed to drop with every step, and the light from the cave entrance faded until it was nothing more than a distant memory. Her flashlight flickered, casting unsettling shadows that danced across the walls. Then, her beam caught something unusual, markings etched into the stone. She moved closer, her fingers tracing the grooves. The symbols were intricate, ancient-looking, unlike anything she had ever seen. "What is this?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. Max whined softly, his body tense. The markings told no clear story, but they felt significant, as though they were part of a forgotten history. Just as she began to examine them further, a sound froze her in place. A low growl, deep and resonant, coming from the darkness ahead. Sarah's heart raced. She swung her flashlight toward the sound, but the beam revealed only more shadows. Max barked sharply, snapping her out of her trance. Her eyes followed his gaze to the ground where something metallic glimmered faintly. She knelt, brushing away dirt and debris to reveal an artifact. It was heavy and ornate, its surface adorned with patterns that mirrored the wall markings. But as her fingers closed around it, the growl returned, louder and closer this time. The realization hit her like a jolt. They weren't alone. Panic set in, but Sarah's instincts took over. Grabbing the artifact, she stood and began to backtrack, keeping her flashlight trained on the darkness. Max stayed close, his growls a warning to whatever lurked in the shadows. the journey back to the cave entrance felt endless. Every step was met with the ominous feeling of being watched. When they finally emerged into the daylight, Sarah's relief was palpable. She collapsed onto the forest floor, her hands trembling as she clutched the artifact. Max barked again, but this time it was his usual playful tone. He licked her face as if to say, "We made it." Sarah looked back at the cave, its dark mouth now silent and still. Whatever secrets it held, she wasn't ready to face them again. Not yet. For now, she had enough to ponder. The artifact in her hands was a mystery in itself, one that hinted at a story far older and deeper than she could imagine. That night, Sarah couldn't sleep. The artifact sat on her desk, its intricate patterns illuminated by the soft glow of her bedside lamp. She had taken photos, examined it under a magnifying glass, and even tried searching online for clues about its origins. But the artifact defied explanation. Every search led to more questions, and Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that it was connected to something much larger than herself. Max, curled up at the foot of the bed, stirred restlessly. His ears twitched, and he let out a low whine. Sarah glanced at him, her unease deepening. "What's wrong, buddy?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Max lifted his head, his eyes fixed on the artifact. It was as if he could sense something she couldn't. Then came the dreams. That night, Sarah found herself back in the cave. The air was colder, the darkness more oppressive. The markings on the walls seemed to glow faintly, pulsing with an otherworldly light. In the dream, she could hear whispers, indistinct but insistent, drawing her further into the depths. She woke with a start, her heart pounding, the whispers still echoing in her mind. Morning brought little relief. The forest, once her sanctuary, now felt alien. Sarah decided to return to the cave, despite her lingering fear. She needed answers.
This time she packed supplies: rope, a stronger flashlight, and a notebook to document anything she found. Max, ever loyal, seemed eager to accompany her, though his occasional glances at the artifact betrayed his wariness. The journey to the cave was uneventful, but the moment they reached its entrance, Sarah felt the same pull as before. The cold air greeted her like an old acquaintance, and the darkness seemed to beckon. With Max by her side, she stepped inside once more, determined to uncover the truth. Deeper into the cave, the markings became more elaborate, their patterns more intricate. Sarah took photos, sketched details in her notebook, and made notes about the layout of the cave. She felt like an archaeologist unearthing a forgotten civilization. But the further she went, the stronger the whispers became. They were clearer now, almost audible, though she couldn't make out the words. Max's behavior grew more erratic. He barked at unseen things, his body tense and his ears swiveling to catch sounds that Sarah couldn't hear. At one point, he stopped entirely, his gaze fixed on a section of the wall. Sarah followed his line of sight and discovered a small opening, just large enough for her to crawl through. She hesitated, the whispers growing louder, almost pleading. Taking a deep breath, she squeezed through the opening, her flashlight revealing a hidden chamber. What she saw took her breath away. The room was filled with artifacts, all similar in design to the one she had found. In the center of the chamber stood a pedestal, and atop it lay a larger object, glowing faintly. The air seemed to hum with energy, and Sarah felt a strange mix of awe and dread. She reached out, her fingers hovering over the glowing object, when suddenly the whispers stopped. The silence was deafening, and then, as if from the very walls of the chamber, a voice boomed. "You have found what was hidden, but are you ready for the truth?"
Sarah's hand trembled as she withdrew it. The room seemed to pulsate with life, the glow intensifying. Max barked furiously, snapping her back to reality. She grabbed the nearest artifact and backed away, the voice repeating its cryptic question. As she made her way out of the chamber, the cave began to shake, dust and debris falling from the ceiling. It was as if the cave itself was alive, reacting to her presence. Emerging into the daylight once more, Sarah collapsed onto the forest floor, clutching the second artifact. Max whimpered, pressing close to her side. She looked back at the cave, its entrance now partially blocked by fallen rocks. Whatever lay within would remain a mystery, for now. But Sarah knew one thing for certain: her life would never be the same. As days turned into weeks, Sarah found herself increasingly drawn to the artifacts. They seemed to emit a faint warmth whenever she touched them, as if alive. She sought out historians and archaeologists, but no one could provide answers. The artifact's origins remained elusive. One evening, while examining the second artifact, Sarah noticed something she hadn't seen before: a hidden compartment. Carefully, she opened it to reveal a fragment of parchment. The writing was faint, written in an ancient script. Desperate for answers, she sought the help of a linguist who specialized in lost languages. The translation was chilling. The parchment spoke of a guardian, an eternal force bound to protect the artifacts and their secrets. It warned of dire consequences should the artifacts be disturbed. Sarah's mind raced. The voice in the chamber, the cave's reaction, it all made